an honor.
And it's an honor to lift our voice and sing
To the living God.
to the living God.
No one can deny.
No one can deny
That Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ is the Most High.
Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go.
That's a powerful video. And it points to a reality. See, I came to you a few weeks ago, and I gave each one of you a bottle of oil. And I told you that you need to keep this as good oil. Remember, you need to have obedience and integrity and loyalty to what God has called you to do. Came back and I talked to you about how you can have forgiveness of this oil. You can even have this oil changed out. You can, if your good oil is not there and you've got some other oil and you want to change it to good oil, I told you even how to do that. And then came back last week and I told you about you need to have fragrant oil. This needs to be oil that worships Christ extravagantly. We talked about that last week. This week, I want to talk with you from a different topic. And I think it's actually more important than any of the topics that we talked about this week. In the past weeks. This week, I want to talk to you from the topic of low oil. You can have good oil. You can have fragrant oil. You can have beautiful, wonderful oil. But if your oil is low, well, things in your life, they tend to get out of whack. And the reality of it all is that as Christians, each and every one of us, we're going to go through some adversity. And just like a motor, you know, when a motor goes through adversity, when it's pushed and it's pushed and it's pushed, the oil on the inside of that motor, it starts to get low. It either burns off or the gaskets begin to open up and it starts to leak. That's what happens to you when you come under pressure. Pressure at your job. When you come under pressure with your children. When you come under pressure with your husband. When you come under the pressure of sin. We sometimes get into a situation to where our circumstances pushes us into a place where we have low oil. It might be good oil, but we look around, we start to feel like we don't have enough oil, enough to take us to the next stop. What I'm talking about today is circumstances versus response. See, without doubt, every single one of us will have circumstances. We will have some adversity. We'll have something to come against us. Every single one of us are going to go through. So one of the biggest myths of the church is that once you join and give your hand to Christ and once you walk up front in front of everybody that your life changes, and what the thought is that you'll never go through anything else. But the reality is you will go through some adversity. Regardless of circumstances, regardless of what you went through, regardless of what happened, even last week, God takes care of those that are faithful. Doesn't matter what you've been through, what your circumstances are. It doesn't matter how hard things have gotten in your marriage, doesn't matter how hard things have gotten at work, God takes care of those that are faithful. And this means that we must always respond in faith. That's what your response has to be. He say over in Romans 8, if God be for me, who can be against me? If God be for your job, who can be against your job? If God be for your marriage, if God be for your sister, your brother, your mama, if God be for your health, who can be against it? So regardless of the circumstances that are happening in our life, we are to be responsible. I spelled that a little bit different than the way it's supposed to be spelled because, listen, in every situation as a Christian, you are able to respond in a Christian way. It doesn't matter what's happened to you or how bad your circumstances are. You have the ability to choose how you're going to respond. You are able to respond faithfully. Folk ought to be able to see that you serve a God that you trust, that you know that whatever you're going through, if you're living for God, if you're in His will, He's going to work it out. You have to be able to respond positively. Nothing worse than a negative Christian. Folk come to you with an issue, and instead of building them up, you tear them down. Nothing worse than that person who sends the inspirational messages to you, the one that's always talking about the God that they serve. That one, nothing worse than watching that one go through and they can't handle it. Things start to shift at work, start to shift at home, things start to shift in their lives at the school, and instead of reacting in a positive manner, they begin to become very negative. And regardless of your circumstance, you must be able to respond proactively. See, that's what Christians do. Christians, we don't sit back and wait on stuff to get done. When things fall apart in our families and when somebody dies or when things fall apart in the marriage, we are the ones that step out on the front line. We're not afraid to take a few bullets for the family, for Christ. So let's look at the text. You guys, we read the text in the responsive reading. Let's look at the text and read through it and see what we can learn from this widow and her oil. I want to see what we can learn that will help us to respond faithfully as we're challenged in our lives. 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 1 through 7. Let's look at those verses. First of all, it says, verse 1 says, one of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, your servant, my husband, has died. You know that your servant feared the Lord. Now the creditor is coming to take my children as his slaves. First of all, she begins by letting the prophet know who her husband is, right? Think about Elijah as we would think about a bishop today. Elijah is over the other prophets in the area. And one of those prophets, one of those ministers, think about him as a reverend at a local church. He dies. And his wife comes up to the bishop and he says, hey, your servant, my husband, the one that served the church loyally, he was there every Sunday. He did everything he was supposed to do. You know, he could have been a carpenter and made money, but instead he worked for you. Now he is dead. And we're in a whole lot of debt. And because he wasn't working a second job, his second job was feeding the hungry and looking out the folk and baptizing folk. Because he was working for the church, we are not able to pay our creditors. And guess what? They are about to come and take my children from me, my 2 sons. Let's take a look at her circumstances. You know, we talked about how circumstances and responses play together. So her circumstances, first we look at it, it says her circumstances are tragic. This is terrible. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I don't care what you've gone through. And we've all been through some stuff. And I've been through some stuff, and you've been through some stuff. And if I could put chairs up here, we could talk, and all of us will go out of here crying today probably. But I don't know anybody in the Bible that's been through what this lady's gone through. She dedicated her life. She gave her husband to the church. And as a reward for her dedication, she lost her husband. Now, a lot of people lose their husbands. A lot of people even lose their houses, and a lot of people lose all kinds of things. I know people who got cancers. I know people who are on the verge of dying right now. But I cannot imagine what it has to be like to know that your children are getting ready to become slaves to somebody else. So not only has she lost her husband, not only is she in the process of losing everything that she owns, everything that they built together, but the one thing that she could have that would take care of her. Remember, during this time, women couldn't work. They couldn't do a lot of things. And so a widow was basically homeless. She had no way to feed herself, but a widow with 2 sons could make it. And now they're going to take her sons from her. So her circumstances are tragic. Look, her circumstances are immediate. She's not talking about something that's going to happen next month or next year or if they lay everybody off. She's not out there thinking about something that might happen and making herself get sick and upset. You know how we do. And then it never comes to pass. And this is happening right now. She's already lost her husband. They've already come and taken everything out of the house, and now they're on their way soon to get her children. And then you have to understand that her circumstances are out of her control. See, during this time, Jewish law would allow for slaves to be taken for debt. So if you owed somebody some money and you could not repay it based on the conditions that were set up at the beginning, you literally would become an indentured slave for 7 years or until the debt is paid off. This is out of her control. I wonder how many credit scores would go up if that was still the case. You wouldn't sign up for stuff so quickly. You wouldn't get that. I wonder how many houses would get smaller, how many cars would get smaller, how many Mercedes would be bought if the end result may end up with you going in slavery. So she's in a tragic situation that's happening right now, and it's out of her control. She can't do anything. Her circumstances are too big even for me to fathom. But let's look at her response. Her response, first of all, is appropriate. She doesn't run up to Elijah and tell him all the stuff she missed out on. You know, we didn't get a chance to go on picnics. My kids have been deprived. Nobody even came down here and checked on me. We were loyal to this church, and you guys haven't done anything for me. She doesn't go off. It's very appropriate. She comes to him. She says, hey, I just want to inform you that the man that worked hard for you and my husband is now dead, and I'm in the process of losing everything, and they're getting ready to take my children. But her response, even under these tough circumstances, and I think many of us would have been okay if she would have went off on Elisha just a little bit. I mean, if she just got him a little told. Like, why I had to come find you? Like, didn't you know all this was happening? Had you come a month ago, I still have my couch. But her response was very appropriate. Her response was appropriate, and her response is to the right person. She doesn't go and talk to the folk down the street and the folk around the corner and the deacons and the usher board and all the folk that can help us. How much time do we waste sharing our problems with people who cannot help us? How much valuable time and energy do we put into conversations with people who don't care? Not just that they won't help us. Most of the time they don't care to help us. And when they care, many times they don't have the means to help us. And that is time that we should spend on our knees. Instead of sending them emails, we need to send some email. But I want to point out one other thing here. She goes to a pastor. And I know we've kind of gotten into this, and I call it this post-Walmart world where we think that, we'll give up the butcher and we don't have to know everybody. People don't have to know our names. We can all come into a place and leave out of place, and we don't really necessarily have to bother a pastor or whatever. But let me tell you something. There are some circumstances in your life, big and small, that you need to have a relationship with the pastor. You need to have somebody on speed dial. You need to have somebody that knows your children, that understands your unique situation and can minister not only to you, but for you. And I'm not just giving big churches a problem, because I honestly believe in every big church there's a group of people being pastored. And if you want to be at a big church, a huge church, I think you should go. But my only advice is make sure that you're in that group of people that are being pastored. Joel Osteen has the biggest church in the United States, but I guarantee you there are 300, 600, 800 folk. If he needs to be at a wedding, he's going to be there for. If he needs to put them in the ground, he's going to be there for them. If he needs to bless their children, if they have a problem with their children, they can call him, and they have them in the telephone, and he knows. We've been sold a bag of goods, guys. Jesus says we're supposed to have a good shepherd, somebody who, when the bad things happen in our life, will come out and get us. Hey, girl, where you been? Seen you in a few weeks. How your children doing? Give me his report card. That's what you need, a good shepherd. He says the other option is a hired hand. So you need someone a little bit more than a tribe leader. You need somebody a little bit more than just responsible for you because you're in a set of last names. I was in Birmingham, true story, for our family reunion. A young lady there had died. A young lady, like our age, young. And she had been a faithful member of a mega church, won't mention the name. And do you know that? And she was a faithful tither to this church. And she died, and weeks went by, and they couldn't find anybody to put this girl in the ground. I was down there, and they asked me, do you think you could do this while you're here? I didn't even know this young lady. But she takes her response to the right person. And there are some times in your life when you don't need to be at home crying by yourself. You need to find a pastor. If it's not me, if it's some man of God out there that you can trust, somebody that will sit down with you on your behalf, go to God for you, stay with you until you get through, and give you good words, positive words. Let's look at verse 2. Elijah asked her, "What can I do for you?" Strange question, isn't it? She poured her life out. She She told him all about her problems, and he asked her, what can I do for you? What you want me to do? Then the second question is, he says, tell me, what do you have in the house? She said, your servant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil. Now let's take a look at Elijah's response. First of all, his first response is compassionate. Now I'm going to turn some people on their head with this. I know some people are thinking, he asked, his first question was, what do you want me to do about it? But how much more of an effective church would we be if we actually ask people, how can I help you? We went over to Reedy Creek and we had a beautiful plan. We found free food. We were going to go and feed that whole community in the summertime, all those children. We sat down at a big table with Mary Webb and the rest of her staff, and we started to talk about it, and we found out something. Mary said, we tried this for 5 years in a row. We averaged 2 kids. We don't have a need for feeding in the Reedy Creek area. And so many times we have a talent, we have a desire, we have a good idea, but it's not filling the need. And we want to push our work and our service. We basically want to fit a round peg into a square hole. That's not what Elisha does here. He says, what do you need from me? How can I help you? Tell me, what exactly would you like me to do about your situation? I heard your husband died, your kids are getting ready to get sold, and you've lost everything. Now, what do you want me to do? Which one do you want me to work on? You need me to bury him? You need me to get you some furniture? You need me to help you with the kids? What you want? So not only was his first response compassionate, but his second response is encouraging. He doesn't go into, tell me about how bad it was. He doesn't go into, oh, I hate to hear that. I'm sorry you lost everything. What he says is, what do you have left? All is not lost. They haven't taken everything from you. What do you have left? And see, these responses are confusing to us. Because in our mind, in our United States Christian mind, we expect a bunch of taglines, right? Oh, just name it and claim it. Oh, God is good. We expect for folk to just start speaking and for Elijah to just start telling them, oh, God's going to fix that. Elijah doesn't know if God's going to fix it. And think about the responses that people give you when you are going through. You lose a parent and folk come to talk to you and they say stuff which lets you know they've never lost a parent. They say what they think they should say instead of going to God, instead of understanding exactly what it is. Because let me tell you something. A testimony is a great thing. And the reason why it's great is because the person went through something, God intervened, and they came through. But when you're sitting there with the lump, when you're sitting there in divorce court, when you're sitting there with the write-up slip, when you're sitting there with your mortgage, with somebody taking your house, sometimes those testimonies don't mean as much to you. You need to hear from somebody who can encourage you, not tell you about what has happened in their life necessarily, but about what God can do. What do you have left? What do you have to work with? What is the good news in your story? What is the silver lining? Let me help you to see how God is still good to you. Now let's look at the widow's response. Her first response is no response. Look back at those scriptures. He asked the question, he said, well, what do you want me to do? She doesn't even answer it. I like that. You know, we stay in this type A world where we want to tell everybody what to do, where to go, when to be there, how long to stay. And if we're not careful, we get in that way with God. God, we go to God and we tell him exactly what we believe that we need, and in most cases it's not enough. If I could just have a little bit more time, if I could just get another payment in, if I could just have my job for another couple of months. And then we get to the end of what we asked for that God blessed us with, and we find out the surprising thing is it wasn't enough. If I could have one more night, if I could have just one more date, if we can just go there one more time, if we could just be together one more time, and you find out the hard way that one more time, it wasn't enough. She doesn't respond. But a second response is one of faithfulness. He says, well, what do you have at the house? What's left? What do you have? Is there anything that you can bring to me? I just need something to work with. Can you bring me anything? Just think real hard. Did he leave anything? Did they leave a piece of furniture, a nightstand? Did they leave anything that we can sell, that we can do something with, that God can bless? What was it? And I can imagine that this lady was, they took everything. They took the drapes. They took the toilets. They took the sinks. They took everything but the front door. They took the carpet. Oh, I do have that little jar of oil. Can you imagine the amount of faith that she had to have, that she had to believe that God was getting ready to do something amazing in her life? She had to know in her heart that God was getting ready to move for her, even to think about a little jar of oil. Look at verse 3. It says, then he said, go and borrow empty containers from everyone, from all your neighbors. Do not get just a few. Then go in and shut the door behind you and your sons, and pour oil into all these containers. Set the full ones to one side. Verse 5, he says, so she left. And after she had shut the door, she followed the directions behind her, and her sons, they kept bringing her containers, and she kept on pouring. The thing that we have to really focus on, the thing we have to really understand, is how to respond in faith. You know, we talked earlier and we said that God, he always takes care of those that are what? Faithful. And being faithful requires us to what? Respond in faith. Just looking at the story, those last couple of verses, we see that faith responds with trust. He tells her to go out and borrow. Now I'm in debt. I don't know how I'm going to make it. The creditors are coming to get my children. And you want me to go and borrow? See, God sometimes will flip things on its head. He'll make you go out and do the opposite of what you expect to do in order for him to show how powerful and miraculous that he is. But it's always a test to see if you trust him. Faith responds with humility. Now, in order for her to go and knock on doors, she's got to go in a place where everybody probably know. They seen the moving trucks coming and getting her furniture, and they know her husband died, and they were already talking when her husband died. How is she going to keep that big house going? How is she going to pay for that stuff? And now Elijah is telling her, you've got to go out and borrow from those people. You got to humble yourself. Instead of going down there and trying to work for them and trying to make money for them, you've got to go down there and ask them if they will give you a container. And then faith responds with action. I don't know if you noticed all those yellow words that I highlighted. Every word in that passage, more than half of those words in that passage were action words. Go, borrow, close the door, come, keep, pour. Responding in faith takes action. In other words, you got to get up off of your knees, praying and praying and praying, and you have to move into a place where you are acting. And then finally, faith responds with obedience. So every single aspect that Elijah told her to do, all the way down to closing the door and not letting anybody else in, she does it. She doesn't deviate from God's plan. She doesn't ask a question. She doesn't take a shortcut.